Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm doing this on YouTube and I'm also recording for the podcast at the same time. For you that are on YouTube, you probably never heard of this podcast, but this is the first time that you come across this platform. And for those of you that are listening over the podcast, thank you so much for always tuning in. And I apologize for being late with the podcast, but a lot has happened since the last time I recorded the last podcast. As you all know, I go to school, I study, I do part-time work, I got a family, so it's a bunch of a lot of things that are happening at the same time. And once in a while, it's really hard to make some time on the side for recording. And in between there, I had to reassess exactly after I recorded the first episodes. I had to come back and sit and reassess what was I trying to put out there. And to give you a recap again, it's more I'm trying to make a platform that I can reach the outside world and the African continent. You know, a lot of misconceptions that happen on the African continent and a lot of misconceptions that are happening outside of the continent, and a lot of misunderstandings and things people think they know about Africa that actually aren't true, and the fears people have for the African continent and the African people. And I thought, what other platform would be available than, me of African descent, being an African myself. I come from Uganda, and I thought I would create a platform that I could speak onto the things that we don't understand about the continent and the struggles that we go through, and then also kind of realize that these struggles are not only being gone through by Africans alone, but pretty much the rest of the world. I've had the privilege of traveling around Europe and a little bit into Asia, and I pretty much saw that we do have the same problems. The only difference is that platforms have not been created to show you that actually we are all going through the same global situations of poverty, a very huge economical imbalance in our societies, the huge differences between the middle classes and the lower classes, the rich and the poor, and we all go through this in the different countries that we live in. But the problem is, when it comes to Africa, you only have one image, and that is of small little kids who are malnourished, wars and Ebola, and that's all that you know. And when it comes to the immigrants, all you see is what you see on the Mediterranean Sea of a lot of people crossing from Africa and coming into Europe. But we don't really get to compare all these continents and see actually there's major similarities that we have when it comes to struggles, when it comes to poverty, when it comes to lack of schools, lack of water, lack of shelter, lack of education, basic lack of health facilities. And I've traveled and I kind of realized actually that these problems are everywhere. The difference is how they are presented to the world and how they are put out there. You find governments, actually, when you find governments like the governments of Bulgaria or Romania, or some a lot of them in the Eastern Europe and a lot of Asian countries, they do actually limit how much is put out there from their country. They do limit, they censor every media, and they try to put up a better image. But when it comes to the African continent, we allowing everyone that comes in can tell their version of the story. But then I realized that a lot of people are so not honest when they tell the stories about Africa. They want to keep telling what other people know about the continent because they don't want to have discussions and create platforms where they can actually tell people what is happening. I've had the privilege of traveling down to Uganda in the past with my family from Denmark, which is the country that I live in, and they were shocked to come down to Uganda and see how people are living, see the infrastructure that we had, see how well-informed people were. And they were even surprised to find everyone spoke English. They did not believe that. They thought that we spoke some, I don't know, different type of language, but they were surprised to see that. They were surprised to come down and find that people are well-spoken, people are well-behaved, people are well-informed. They were surprised to find that there were systems that were functioning very well. They were surprised to find that the people had a certain way that they perceived, the world, and the world also has a certain way that it perceives Africa as a continent. And so I created this platform where I wanted to speak onto that. I wanted to speak onto things like, why is everyone in Africa is poor? And I've had these conversations where I'm like, I come from Uganda, and I've seen, for example, I've seen houses that I've never seen anywhere else in the world. I've walked into houses and when you see what is inside, when you see the IT systems, when you see the security systems, when you see the quality of things, materials that have been used to construct these houses, I've never seen that anywhere else. When you see the architecture, you're like, oh my God. But if we're not showing the world these things, then the world doesn't really know what is out there. The world is afraid of traveling to countries like, like Uganda. I came here and I've had conversations where people thought that Uganda has been at war forever. Like they ask me questions like, how do you come to Europe? Did you have to smuggle yourself into a different country to make it to Europe? And I'm like, I went to the airport just like everyone else, and I boarded a plane and I came to Europe. But they think, Uganda is still at war. We are fighting and killing each other. We can barely walk on the streets. And I'm like, we have freedoms that even half the Asian people don't have. Freedoms to walk wherever I want to go, freedoms to go wherever I want to go, freedoms to dress how I want, freedoms to speak and say what I want, freedoms to stand up and speak to my president without, feeling any boundaries, And I thought I could create a platform like this one where I would speak onto that. So for those of you that are coming to the channel for the first time, pardon the quality of the video, that's not my specialty. And for those of you that are listening at home there, I'm happy to be back. I'm recording for the first time again, and this time around I'll be traveling to Uganda come February next year, and I hope that's why I also started a YouTube channel, because then I get to be in Africa and I get to talk about things while I'm there, and I get to show you what is happening actually in Africa. And obviously this is not just positive, it's also negative. We're going to talk about the good and the bad, how talk about economics, talk about politics, talk about religion. And I know these are very sensitive matters, but obviously I'll be as neutral as possible and show you what is happening in the countries that I happen to travel up. I plan to travel while I'm down there, but obviously I'm going on internship, and that will limit how far I go and how much time I have on my plate. But thank you so much, and I hope to keep creating, I hope to keep presenting, and I hope that we can interact together. And for those of you that are listening in, please remember to drop some comments, remember to write to me. You can always write to me at vaafricapodcast@hotmail.com. That is the email, and please leave some comments, and let's interact. Let's talk about things that matter, and leave out the things that divide us. Remember that we're all one people, and I hope that with such platforms we can create awareness and stop dividing ourselves. Thank you so much for listening, and YouTube, see you later. And for you on the podcasts, welcome back. Love you all, and stay positive. Leave the negativity out. That's not a good thing. Love you all.